This is a PowerWorks podcast short with Glenn Power and me, James Piecowye. Maybe 20 kilometers in and engine light comes on.
Oh.
And it's like, oh man. And it turns out the engine light was coming on because of, well, it was because of the, something going on with the fuel system.
Okay.
And it turns out it was because of the gas cap. And probably hadn't turned it enough times, or it hadn't sealed. Yeah, and so it was registering an error. And after 4 cycles of starting, stopping, and how it went off, which was great. It reset itself, but that was a little bit of a concern.
Yeah, it's a modern car phenomenon, really. I mean, we all will have had a first car. I remember my first car. I remember my breather pipe from my fuel tank falling off of the clips that were on the side of the tank and dragging down on the floor. And that was just to let fuel vapors out so the tank didn't pressurize. You can't do that now. We can't let raw hydrocarbon go into the atmosphere anymore. It's irresponsible and also a waste. It's unnecessary.
So hold on. So do all cars have something like this on it?
Yes.
Okay.
So, in fact, on Ford, maybe some others, but Ford always springs to mind because it's a big thing. On Ford, they have an actual warning light for the fuel cap.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
So when this fault occurs, it brings the light on for the fuel cap. But North American market is a strange one because you have federal law, but you've obviously got state law.
Right.
California's always been famously zero emissions as much as they can be. So the fuel systems on California vehicles are different to the fuel systems on a Texas vehicle.
Oh, of course they are. Right?
It's the same vehicle.
Yeah.
So John Ellis, who had 2 Jaguars, both of which he bought from America, one of them was a California one and one of them wasn't. I can't remember where the other one came from. Now on the California one, it had vapor recovery when you refuel. So we've all been to the petrol station. We've all seen petrol going in a tank and you see the vapor. You smell it. It's great.
Yeah.
But you see the vapor coming out of the fuel neck where they're filling
It's
it.
a carcinogen, those chemicals, by the way. Just we love smelling it. But,
we like the smell of it. I mean,
but,
what can I say? This can't be. And this, I don't know what's in there. But that's not allowed in California.
Right.
And it hasn't been for a long time. So, and the intent for it to not be allowed was there for obviously a lot longer. Now, when you refuel a car, they have onboard refueling vapor recovery. So there's basically, and this is not scientifically accurate, but it's to illustrate a point, there is a pump, effectively, a pumping action inside the tank that sucks at the same time as the fuel's going in to keep the vapors inside the tank so the vapors don't escape. That is problematic when it fails.
Right.
Lack of power, engine warning light on. Some of these things are symptoms, genuine symptoms, and some of them are forced symptoms through software to get the vehicle looked at by the owner of the vehicle. Now, a loose fuel cap is very, very rarely going to cause you a drivability issue. But what it is doing is it's allowing the fuel tank to lose pressure.
Right.
When it's losing pressure, the evaporative emission system, we call it, so basically the evaporating petrol that's in the tank at all times, that fuel is vaporizing, and when it goes around the engine, it doesn't go to the engine and then it's burnt or spat out the exhaust. It cycles back, so there's a fuel return and it goes back into the pump, back into the tank through the pump. The pump is running, so the pump is hot. The engine is hot because it's running, so the fuel that goes around and comes back is also hot. So it vaporizes quicker and quicker, and petrol is very, very volatile. So there's a valve on the system called a purge valve, which basically when the pressure gets to a certain level will open and allow this vapor to go via a charcoal filter to the engine for burning. And if the pressure isn't building up sufficiently for that valve to need to open, or for whatever, it will detect that and it will tell you there's a problem. And it's not necessarily going to immediately cause you a drivability issue. However, software on the engine management system is written for certain parameters.
Right.
And within that parameter range, it expects vapor from the evaporative emission system to be used in combustion. So when that's not there because the pressure isn't there sufficiently to get it there, it can create some drivability issues, because the way to counteract that is to increase the fuel flow through the fuel injectors. But that's very, very hard to do in a small enough quantity to account for vapor loss. So you end up with overfuel. And the engine doesn't want that, because you'll damage the catalytic converters, you'll kill the whales, and the rainforest will wilt and everything else. So you can't have that. So it's a symptom of the world we live in, really, that if your fuel cap is left loose, it's a problem. Now,
and this is quite a new phenomenon.
Relatively.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
I'm thinking, I mean, my vehicle doesn't have this technology on it, but mine's like a 2008 model. So I'm thinking, this is what, last 10 years, maybe?
You know, there are evaporative emission systems on your car, because the purge valve on the the purge valve on the Wrangler is something that we change.
Okay.
You've got the charcoal canister, because one of them's held on with a bungee cord. Is it the red one or the yellow one? I can't remember which one it is.
Red one.
So you've got the
rope.
system.
I changed that. It's rope now.
Nice. But you've got the system on there.
Oh, okay.
It's just a lot less sensitive to bring the light on. The only other thing is, what you'll find is, so your car's a good example, actually. If you cycle the ignition on and off 5 times, if there are any engine fault codes stored, it will put them up on your LCD display. It will just scroll across the fault codes. You'll get the fault code. Now, I don't remember the fault code out of the top of my head. But then if you get that fault code and you put it into a website that will decode it for you and explain what it is, oftentimes when you get evaporative emissions faults, it will always say first step. It will always say check fuel cap. Always. Okay. That will be the first thing that any fault with evaporative emissions will always say check the fuel cap.
Are we getting a lot of faulty fuel caps these days, do you think, in cars, or just not tight enough?
Not really. I mean, there is a rubber seal, a rubber O-ring on there, which isn't, but it's a very robust one. It's designed for fuel vapor, so it's managing and taking on and off a couple of times a week. It's not the end of the world.
After I got this warning, I then started to be really cognizant of giving it a good 3-4 turns when I got it on, and that click, click,
click.
Let
it click as many times as you can. Yeah,
but then it was self-certification, so it was all on me, right? So
yeah, these things are there, and like I say, you probably didn't notice it driving differently. It was just the light was on.
Yeah, and it's not my vehicle, so you know my vehicle has a light on. I'm okay with that. Yeah. And this is someone else's vehicle, and it's rather new. And I'm thinking, man, you know.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with the engine light, we've probably touched on this before, but if the light's on solid, so it's just on, and the vehicle doesn't seem to be using more fuel than it normally would, or it doesn't feel slower than it normally does, or it doesn't feel or smell different, you're okay to get to the service station to get it checked. But if it's flashing, you need to stop straight away.
Right.
The reason for that is twofold. Obviously, a flashing engine light means that there's a misfire, but it means that there's a misfire sufficiently bad enough to damage the catalytic converter. So the 2 reasons for stopping your car is, one, if it's damaging to the catalytic converter, that means there's raw fuel going into the exhaust. That catalytic converter will get sulfur deposits on it and fail within minutes. And then you're talking thousands of dirhams, even dollars, to get that replaced. Second issue is you've got raw fuel coming out the exhaust. You know, what are you doing? You know, it's not good for the environment. It's not good for your pocket. No. And you need to stop. So whenever the engine light's on solid, as long as the car's driving normal, and if you're unsure in any way, don't drive it. But as long as you think and you're confident that it's driving normal, you're okay. It's amber for a reason. There are red warning lights that are red because we associate that with danger, and if there's a red warning light on, stop what you're doing straight away.
Red warning light if it's flashing, if it's binging,
if it's flashing, if you've got beeps,
pull over, stop.
Yeah. We've just released an A5. It was a 3-litre supercharged V6, and the customer had driven it with the temperature gauge at 130, so that's the max on that car.
Yeah,
and he'd driven it because he was only a few miles from home.
Yeah,
and blew the head gasket on it.
There you go. Yeah,
and there's a red light on. He sent me a picture of the gauge saying, is this okay to drive? My AC's still working. And then to the right of the gauge on the picture is the LCD screen, and it says stop engine, check coolant. Stop engine.
Yeah.